Okay. Okay, so I'm going to take roll. We're going to start with Vice Chair Delagnu,
Hi.
Commissioner Humayun,
Here.
Commissioner Klein, Commissioner Liu, Chair Texler,
Present.
Commissioner Whedon,
Present.
Commissioner Wan. Okay. Let the record show that Commissioners Texler, Delagnu, Whedon, and Humayun are present, and Commissioners Liu, Klein, and Wan are absent at the October 11, 2021 Environmental Commission meeting.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and get started. We do have a little bit of a special announcement today. Is Indigenous Peoples Day today. So hopefully everyone is maybe taking a minute to think about the Ohlone people who were the original inhabitants of our land here, and particularly how they respected nature and were good environmental stewards. So hopefully we can follow in their footsteps in that regard. So we will move on. Any public comments on items not on the agenda, please make yourself known. It looks like we have one.
I have another quick announcement, if that's okay.
Okay, so we have two public announcements, so go ahead, Elaine.
I don't know if it's an announcement. I wanted to make a comment to the Environmental Commission. Thanks for allowing the public to talk like this. And I'm not sure if housing has been front and center in your agenda. And I think I just wanted to put the word in that housing is a really huge environmental issue, that if it pertains to both traffic and sprawl, of course. If the city of Los Altos continues not to build more housing for families here within Los Altos, it will create a lot more traffic, even more, as people have to drive in here all the time. And also they'll have to live somewhere, so it'll create more sprawl. And what we really need is denser growth centered around jobs and transit. And we are lucky here to have a few different Caltrain stations very close by. And so if a family were to move to Los Altos, hopefully one of them would be able to work here and not even need a car, and the other one might be able to get over to the Caltrain to go to a job someplace else. And hopefully the children would have a safe route to school by bicycle. And so if you would say, well, there's no room for these cars, I would say build housing here in Los Altos for people, not cars. And we can require that housing developers to include secure bike parking, to charge for automobile parking. We could create more bike paths, especially physically separated. And we could charge for parking, which would disincentivize cars. So there are a lot of ways we can minimize the cars, but we really need room for people, families to live here in Los Altos. And we know we need that. People working here have many different wage levels. And so we don't want to provide housing only for people with high wages, when we know we need people of all wages to be living here, and we want their children to have the chance. But then that's environmental justice. But so just in terms of environment, to keep the level of the traffic down and to decrease the amount of sprawl that goes out into our wonderful open spaces, we really need more housing in Los Altos, and it's an environmental issue.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
I encourage you to maybe listen to our agenda item tonight on the cap, and there's a element in there as related to housing. So, and then I think we had one more comment from Donna Staton.
Yes. Hi, everybody. This announcement is in the form of an invitation to all the members of the Commission and anybody else interested in the environment. The invitation is to a seminar this Thursday evening on plastic pollution and the solutions to plastic pollution. Speaking as a member of Greentown Los Altos, two of our members from the Zero Waste team, myself and Margie Suazo, will be speaking as part of this seminar. And I forgot to mention, this is a seminar that was created as a partnership with Compassion Week, which is going on this week in Los Altos. So maybe some of you are aware of that. But we also are really excited. We'll be hearing from Jordan Wells and Heidi Sanborn.
I don't know that. Oh my God, yeah.
National Stewardship Action Council. So they're going to be reviewing some of the legislation that just passed that's related to recycling and to plastic reduction. And we think it's going to be a really fun and informative seminar that focuses not primarily on the problem, but rather how we can all be part of the solution, both at the individual level and at the legislative level. And we'll be talking about the CAP and the new Sustainability Commission at the county and getting involved in your local commissions. So should be a win-win for everybody all around. So the way to find out about how to register is to go to the Greentown Los Altos website. And you can just Google that and you'll see it right there on the front page, and then you can register from there. So thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we will move along, and we have our minutes from our last meeting, September 13th. So hopefully everyone, the commissioners, have had a chance to look at it. Do we have any changes? And if not, do we have a motion for approval?
I'll move the approval of the minutes from the September, I believe it was 13th meeting.
Correct. Thank you, Don.
I second that.
Thank you, Bruno. All in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, there was that last one. Okay. All right, I think so. We got approval of our meeting minutes. All right, and now we get to go to the fun stuff. So we have, first we have a presentation tonight from the Local Government Commission, and Roger Dickinson is here from the Local Government Commission to talk to us a little bit about what's going on in the California legislature as it relates to environmental legislation. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us. I know there's probably a lot to cover, but maybe you can just give us the highlights. So we appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and commissioners. Thanks for the invitation to join you, even if only virtually this evening. And I want to thank you also, each of you, for your public service, serving on the commission and serving your community. I'm actually a former county supervisor in the county of Sacramento and a former member of the state assembly. So I certainly have a great appreciation for people who are willing to devote their time and energy to public service in any capacity. And I don't know that you get thanked enough. So please accept my thanks extended to you. And Miko has some slides, hopefully, that she can display. Then we can jump into this and try to keep it brisk. So let me just say, as a precursor, there we go. The action in the legislature this year related to climate and associated subjects really came in the budget as opposed to policy legislation and bills themselves. Although there were lots of policy initiatives introduced by legislation at the outset of the year, with the advent of the absolutely unforeseeable, pleasant but unforeseeable historic budget surplus, much of the action, in fact, almost all the action, moved into the discussion realm of the budget as opposed to legislation. And I've just picked out a few things to try and illustrate not just that point, but actually the tenor of the legislative session as well. So we can go to the next slide, Amico. I've got just a couple bills that I want to chat with you about very quickly. And the first is AB 965. This is by Assemblymember Levine from Marin County, actually, and it was designed to address the need to get electric and alternative vehicle charging infrastructure into existing structures and existing buildings, particularly multifamily residential as well as non-residential. The reason I highlighted this is it made it all the way through the Assembly and through the Senate committee, and then stalled on the Senate floor. And I think it stalled because the Assembly member, the author, was tackling a tough subject and trying to take on existing buildings. And lots of different interests involved in that. Lots of points that have to be addressed along the way. So the bill was moved by the author to what's called the inactive file, which means it's not dead. It's sitting there. And assuming that Mr. Levine can resolve the issues that were raised by those who had concerns about the bill, he can take it up and move it again next year. But it is a reflection of the fact that there is a tension on getting charging infrastructure into existing structures, and that's going to be necessary to have success with expanding both access to and use of electric vehicles and alternative fuel vehicles. And we can go to the next slide. This is AB 897 by Assemblymember Kevin Mullen, just up the peninsula from you all in Los Altos. And this bill actually was intended and designed to give some structure and direction from the state level, as well as support to regional adaptation collaboratives that have developed. And there's one in the Bay Area. There are a number around the state that have organically grown up over time, but don't have really recognition from the state level. This bill actually did not make it. It died in the Senate Appropriations Committee, but it is an example of the discussion having moved from a policy bill to the end of the budget. And as you see, as we get into talking about the budget in a few minutes, that the essence of what Assemblymember Mullen was trying to accomplish has migrated into the budget and survives, even though the bill did not. We can go to the next slide. There you can see that it died in the Senate Appropriations Committee. Now, AB 1395 is of a slightly different character. It was authored by Assemblymember Al Marzouchi from the Palos Verdes Peninsula down in Los Angeles County. This bill, which didn't start out this way, actually became the flashpoint for the conflict between the business interests of the State Chamber of Commerce, the Building Industry Association, the Farm Bureau, agricultural interests, and environmental organizations. As you can see from the slide, it was really only a policy statement and not calling for anything specific in terms of action other than establishing the policy and then calling for implementation of the policy. But business and related interests felt that it would be harmful to the economy. They were joined, by the way, by some organized labor interests. Some environmental organizations, most of which supported the bill, still felt that 2045 is actually too late to get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions. So the bill, as I said, became the focus of intense lobbying and made it all the way to the Senate floor, but did not pass. Picked up about 13 votes in favor. It needed 21 at least to get off the Senate floor. When the, Emiko, if you go to the next slide, you'll see you see the action. And when it says reconsideration granted, what that means is that even though it failed a vote, Mr. Marzouchi was given permission to bring the bill back up. So this, again, is a bill that could be revived next year, but it is a reflection of the intensity of the debate that still exists, even though we think of ourselves as being environmental leaders in the nation and even across the world. It's still the subject of very, very intense debate here in the state. We can go to the next slide. This is SB 617, which was authored by Senator Scott Wiener of San Francisco. And it would have required, as you can see from the slide, local governments to implement automated online permitting for residential solar systems, and would have called out a specific funding source for that. As you can also see from the slide, this bill did not make it either. It was held in the Senate Appropriations Committee. But again, consistent with our theme that things that often were introduced in the policy realm moved into the budget realm. If we go to the next slide, Emiko, you will see that the budget bill, actually, SB 129, appropriates $20 million for this very purpose. So in fact, while Senator Wiener is not going to get credit for having his bill make it to the governor and get signed, the objective of the bill, the purpose of the bill, is going to be realized through the budget. And for those of you on the commission, this is something you may want to look into, whether your city has already gone. If you don't know this already, you may, whether Los Altos has already gone to online automated permitting for residential solar. But if not, there's a potential money source out there through the State Energy Commission that could be accessed to help financially support implementing such a system. So hopefully this is a piece of useful and practical information for all of you as far as what can be done in the city of Los Altos to promote and enable online automated and much less expensive permitting. A lot of jurisdictions, Los Altos may be among them, have gone actually to virtual building inspections. And so this is also an opportunity to undertake that kind of approach if it hasn't already been done in Los Altos. It can be more efficient, it can be less expensive, it can allow the city to stretch its resources in terms of building inspection as well. So it has a lot of attributes to it. And Emiko, let's move to the next slide. I wanted to just give you a few slides and hopefully Emiko can, if she hasn't already, can provide these slides to you in printed form, because I'm going to show you a couple of charts that are pretty hard to read as far as the slides are concerned. But a couple of areas of major concentration in the budget as far as climate is concerned include, one, clean transportation, and then two, we're going to look at in a minute, climate resilience. So with respect to clean transportation, there, as noted in the slide, is included $3.9 billion over the next 3 years for a whole variety of investments related to clean transportation. This is actually outside of the program that allows people to make a claim on their for tax credits on their purchase of a clean vehicle. This is a lot of investments in development and deployment of clean vehicles, with particular emphasis on buses and trucks, heavy vehicles that are often heavy-duty diesel vehicles on our roads today. And so we can go to the next slide. Okay, well that shows up, at least shows up okay on my screen. I hope on yours as well. This is where this 3.9 billion is going in the time frame for its expenditure. I should note that the only money actually appropriated, of course, is in the 21-22 year. So the package really represents for the next 2 years, 22-23 and 23-24, a promise, if you will. That is to say, the legislature could come back and change those appropriations or not make them at all in the next couple of years, but I wouldn't expect that. The commitment has been made through these agreements between the legislature and the governor. So while you can't absolutely take them to the bank, it's about the next best thing. In terms of the investments here, you can see 290 million for transit buses and infrastructure, for example, 450 million for school buses and infrastructure related to that. These are the kinds of investments that are going to make a big difference in cleaning up the air. So they've got air quality benefits as well as GHG emission reduction benefits, particularly for school buses. Moving school buses to electric or alternative fuels means a cleaner ride for the children on their way to and from school, as well as benefiting the environment generally. So these are particularly important investments. And as was noted in the in the prior slide, when you look at the distribution of GHG emissions in California, and you probably all know this, nearly 50% come from the transportation sector. And if you add in oil and gas production, it actually exceeds 50%. So we can't meet any of our climate goals to get to the reductions in levels that we're working toward and must accomplish without tackling in a very major and serious way the transportation sector. And then we can go to the next slide, Emiko. Now, the climate resilience package was something that emerged almost in a way that no one could imagine, quite frankly. In the governor's proposed budget that he put out in January, if my memory serves, he proposed about $1.1 billion for investment in various elements of climate resilience. Well, with, again, that historic budget surplus, this became an agreement between the legislature and the governor to more than triple that amount. And nobody could have imagined it. It's unprecedented, but also very necessary. And we can go to the next slide. So the categories of expenditure I've actually split into two charts. It's one chart, but I split it into two slides, I guess I should say. Among and I think many of them, if not all of them, are going to be of interest to you as members of the Environmental Commission in Los Altos. You can see right off the top, 250 million for urban greening and forestry. We have considerable resources committed to addressing community resilience through the centers and extreme heat. So combined there, you can see 500 million across 3 years in those two categories. There's a lot of money you can see devoted to nature-based solutions. And that 768 million over 3 years is the single biggest allocation in the package. It really represents an area of emphasis for the state Senate. They wanted a big allotment put toward nature-based solutions and multi-benefit approaches. So there's a lot of opportunity there because it's not really fleshed out, and that's true with a lot of these programs. There's a lot of flexibility, a lot to be yet determined in the specific design and distribution of the design of the programs and distribution of the money. So it's looking at being creative and watching the state agencies, primarily the Natural Resources Agency, the Office of Planning and Research, the Strategic Growth Council, the Air Resources Board to some extent, the Energy Commission. All of these agencies are going to have a hand, Department of Water Resources are going to have a hand in shaping these programs, and they're going to need input from local community members and local officials on what the specifics of these programs ought to look like. You can also see there's a significant amount of money for coastal protection and adaptation at 500 million, and ocean protection at 100 million. So those are areas, again, that could be of real interest to you and your community in Los Altos. Let's go to the next slide. Here are the balance of the allocations in the climate resilience package. And just to call out, I talked about AB 897 by Kevin Mullen a little earlier. There's money here for, as you can see, for climate adaptation and resilience planning grants at 25 million and 250 million for regional climate resilience planning and implementation. That's really the money that is aligned with the purpose that Assemblymember Mullen had in his AB 897. But the legislature, by not adopting his bill, hasn't really given a lot of policy direction to the administration on how to set up and operate the program that distributes this money. It's going to be primarily done through the Office of Planning and Research, as you can see from the chart a little bit, with the Strategic Growth Council. So here is a great example of an opportunity for local commissions, citizens, elected officials to have input with OPR on the guidelines that get developed for the project, what gets emphasized, the funding rather, what gets emphasized in the course of designing the program and distributing the money. So there's a lot there to be done, and a big potential benefit to, again, to local communities and regions. So that's a very quick review, hopefully within your time guidelines. Anything, if there's more information that you would like, there's my contact information. Happy to try to fill in blanks if there are some. Again, thanks for the opportunity, and if you have time for questions or comments, I'm certainly happy to entertain those.
Wow, well, thank you. That was quite a whirlwind, but very interesting, especially some of the funding opportunities. I think are quite exciting. So I will go ahead and see if there are any commissioners that have questions or follow-up comments. And of course, as you said, I think Emiko already has the slides, so we can, of course, get those to have the details. Actually, Emiko, if you can stop sharing, because that way I can see everybody better. Thank you so much. Okay, any follow-up questions, comments?
Well,
Yes.
these are great news. I guess I didn't know that so many good opportunities and the funding looks very promising. And so I guess one question I have is that, so if you call any city in the state that to ask for the SB 129 about solar, so there should be already implementation about online permitting for solar installation.
So at this stage, the money has been appropriated. I believe the Energy Commission is going to have to develop some program guidelines for the distribution of that 20 million. So I don't think you could, for example, get a grant right now. I think the CEC is still going to have to go through some administrative work to set up the program for distribution, but it's something that your city staff could certainly touch base with folks at the Energy Commission, say, we're aware of this money. We'd like to know what the process is going to be for setting up the program and distributing the money.
Okay. Well, I seems to see some I guess some information from construction or solar contractors about something similar, but so regarding to the funding, that means the fund will go to the solar provider, and therefore also for the city to provide online permitting with the help for, I guess, the funding for the homeowners to install the solar.
So this money is not related to any support or subsidy for people installing residential solar. It's actually money for jurisdictions to set up the administrative process in their city or their county to handle permitting online and on an automated basis. So if it, for example, if it would cost the city of Los Altos, let's just say $25,000 or $50,000 to set up an online permitting process, that's what this money is intended to help pay for, not actually the installation of solar.
I see. It's making the process easier online. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
So it looks like Commissioner Humayun also had a question about, just similar to what I've been thinking, is there guidance on how a city like us with limited staff resources, how we might access some of the funds that are coming available, and even maybe more so, what's the best way to stay abreast of when those funds and what specific projects are going to be.
It's a great question, and there is not yet guidance for this funding, since the budget just was actually the bills for the climate resilience package were what are called budget trailer bills and just adopted in September. In some cases, in the clean transportation and in the climate resilience package, I'm trying to think of one, if I can spot one, where they're really putting money into, well, I'll give you an example. There is an existing urban greening forestry program that's existed through the Natural Resources Agency for a while. So in that case, that money, and there's 50 million this year to go into that program, that the agency is really going to be able, I suspect, to just take that 50 million and plug it in to their existing program for distribution. They won't need to develop guidelines or regulations or things of that kind because they've already got them. But as we were saying, for example, with the Climate Adaptation Collaborative planning and implementation, there aren't any guidelines or regulations for that yet. So the Office of Planning and Research is going to have to add some staff They're going to have to develop guidelines and regulations if they need them. They're going to have to identify the kinds of projects or programs that they want to fund. I expect that's all going to take, I would look at it this way. If they have any money, and then they would have to solicit grants, solicit applications, and evaluate those and make grants. If they actually have money going out the door to communities or organizations before the end of next June, that's going to be pretty impressive. I think it'll take them a while. In terms of how you can follow this, the website for the Office of Planning and Research, the Strategic Growth Council, for these agencies will have information on it about these programs. Again, there will be one or more staff people in each of these agencies who has prime responsibility. And if the city staff, your city staff, can reach out to the agencies. I mean, I would look at the websites first, the agency websites first, and then see if the county staff, the city staff, if they have enough bandwidth, they can reach out if there are programs of particular interest to the agencies and say, we'd like to be informed of anything going on and what's developing with this, so that when money actually becomes available, we can try to seek some of it in a timely fashion. I would also say that the local government commission puts out an email periodically with funding opportunities. So if you go to the LGC website, you can sign up for that. If that doesn't work, somebody, Emiko or somebody, email me and I'll make it happen. I've never signed up for it, so I don't know exactly how that happens. I just get it. But if it doesn't work to sign up on our website, have Emiko email me and I will follow up. And I assume the League of Cities will, over time, put out information on these kinds of funding opportunities too, although I don't know exactly what kind of information they communicate to all the cities.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? I think we're all digesting. Thank you so much, Roger. That was really great. And we hope that we can avail ourselves of some of that funding. And we appreciate your work. So thank you for taking the time tonight.
You bet. Thanks for your work again, and I wish you good luck.
Thank you. All right. So now we get to think a little bit about some of the great programs that we will do and that may qualify for some of that funding. But we have our climate action and adaptation plan presentation.
All right. So I had myself on mute. I'm sorry, but I wanted to respond to his comment. We do follow the funding available through this Strategic Growth Council, and so if that's something that you want us to watch for on behalf of the city of Los Altos, we'd be happy to do that. Just as a comment.
Great, thank you. Well, we will note that. Hopefully, Emiko is noting that as well. Thank you. All right, so we have EcoShift, who has been preparing the climate action and adaptation plan for us, who will be giving us a presentation of where their work in concert with the subcommittee is at this stage. So I believe we're gonna be having, is it Ben Fordham who's gonna be presenting, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
We have Zach as well.
Yeah, I can just introduce really quick. Sorry, I know you can't see me, so this is really odd, but at least it is for me. So yeah, we have Ben Fordham, Kristen Cushman, and Jordan Daniels and Zach Youngerman. So they are all here from EcoShift. And Ben, let me know if you're able to, if you have the share screen rights. Of course, if not, I'm happy to do it.
Let me just try here. Can folks see my screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. Let's see if I could just get into present mode. Yeah, so thanks everybody. As Emiko and the chair just said, we're presenting on overview and key outcomes for the 2021 Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. We wanted to say, first of all, just thanks to everybody for the opportunity to present here. As Emiko said, I'm Ben. I'm a senior climate and energy analyst with EcoShift, and I'm also the acting project manager for this project. We also have Zach with us, who's been leading the climate vulnerability and adaptation work, and he's going to present on the vulnerability and adaptation slides. And then we also have Kristen and Jordan with us as well. Kristen helped facilitate a lot of the stakeholder engagement for this process. So if there are specific questions on that, Kristen can address those. And then Jordan Daniels is our green building expert. He helped work on the building decarbonization pathways. So if there are specific questions for him, he's able to answer those as well. Getting briefly into our agenda, we'll do a brief recap of climate action planning in Los Altos. We'll look at the purpose and overview of the 2021 update to the CAP. And then we'll look at some of the key results, strategies, and projected outcomes of the CAP. So just a brief overview. I think probably most of the folks on this call are familiar, but for the folks who aren't, the original Climate Action Plan for Los Altos was developed in 2013. It established a number of goals, including alignment with state guidance and requirements, providing an educational resource to the community, as well as providing leadership that the community, I think, felt then and still feels that it's important to provide leadership on these type of important areas like climate action planning. The 2013 CAP set a greenhouse gas reduction target of 15% from 2005 levels by 2020. As we'll talk about in a moment, the city has exceeded that target. And progress on the 2013 CAP, detailed 44 actions, and 28 have been fully implemented and are either complete or ongoing. And then 16 actions were deemed either not feasible at the time or designated for future implementation. And then the chart on the right is just kind of a graphic illustration of those targets. And I believe these slides are also public, so if folks want to go back and look at these more closely, they could definitely do that. So the city already has a climate action plan. Why the need for a new CAP? Well, first, climate action plans need to be updated periodically as the latest science and methodologies kind of continue to improve and evolve. We want to continue to use those. California's SB 379 requires cities to prepare for the future impacts of climate change that can't be avoided at this point. And the 2013 CAP target was also for 2021, or 2020 rather, so it's time to set a new climate action plan target. And the graphic on the right just kind of demonstrates the cyclical nature of this work. Looking at some of the goals of the 2021 CAP, build a resilient and carbon neutral city, strive for consistency with science-based targets. So making sure that we're aligned with what the latest climate science is telling us the city's targets should be. And then preserving the quality of life in Los Altos, which we found was something that was really important through the stakeholder engagement process. as well as increasing human health and wellness within the city. Some of the objectives and key milestones that were developed by the Environmental Commission Subcommittee include an 85% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2005, from 2005 levels rather by 2030, and carbon neutrality by 2035. To lead this effort, the subcommittee developed a mission statement and a vision statement. And I'll just give folks a second to look at these, but the most important thing I think about these, the vision and mission statement, are that throughout the process of this work, we continually made sure to ask ourselves, you know, does this accomplish the vision of the CAP? Does this align with the mission of the CAP? So these were kind of the guiding statements that we used. And again, folks could come back and download the slides and review these at their leisure. So to get the work started, we conducted a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and I was going to mention quickly just in terms of the technical terms, when we refer to greenhouse gas mitigation, we're referring to reducing greenhouse gas emissions that are being emitted from the city. And then when we refer to climate adaptation, we're referring to preparing the city for the future effects of climate change that we might not be able to mitigate. So that's just a note on kind of the terminology that we use. So for the greenhouse gas inventory for this CAP, 2018 was chosen as the baseline year based on the availability of high quality data. As we mentioned, the city exceeded the original CAP target. So the results of the 2018 inventory show that the city, as of 2018, was 23% below the CAP target for 2020 and 36% below the 2005 level. In terms of a distribution of the emissions, the city reduced its emissions from energy substantially when it joined Silicon Valley Clean Energy in 2017. So transportation, as was discussed earlier during this meeting, transportation makes up a larger share of emissions within Los Altos, 61%. 36% were from energy, and because Los Altos' energy supply is carbon-free or almost carbon-free, those remaining energy emissions come mostly from utility-supplied methane gas, commonly referred to as natural gas. And then the remaining 3% were from other sources. And then the table on the right has a breakdown of the sectors. And again, folks can come and look at this more closely at their leisure, but on the left-hand column are the different sectors from the government and the community. And then the middle column has 2005 emissions, and then the right-hand column has 2018 emissions. And next, we're going to get into a little bit of the current state of climate change in California and Los Altos related to vulnerability and adaptation. And I'm going to go ahead and hand off to Zach to present these slides. And Zach, please let me know when you're ready for me to advance the slides.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. So as Ben said, the next couple of slides are really about how the climate is changing and the need for adaptation. We're way past the point of uncertainty with regard to climate change. And the left side of the screen shows all of the reports that have come out over the years, starting with the first IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change report, more than 30 years ago. And since then, we've had more and more downscaled, localized information, including the first California-specific climate change assessment more than 10 years ago. If you saw Roger Dickinson's slides quickly, there was funding for the fifth California climate change assessment in that budget plan. So we we have a lot of information, and in fact, climate change has been going on for so long now that we have decades of history, and so we can see it very well in the observations of climate indicators and phenomena. So an increase of temperature over the past century, increasing droughts, including the longest drought on record in the past decade, annual and seasonal whiplash in the Bay Area, and some very worrisome decreases in snowpack, which of course provides a lot of the water supply. And then finally, the growing size, number, and season length of wildfires, with 9 of the 10 largest just in the last decade. And most of this data here comes from the 4th California Climate Change Assessment, and then the information on fires comes from CAL FIRE, because just from last year, these numbers had to be updated. Thanks, Ben. The next slide, please. But so while we know what climate change has brought to California, and some degree what it's expected to bring to California, there hadn't ever been a Los Altos specific assessment. So this was the first, and for this plan, we created a vulnerability assessment using an online tool produced by UC Berkeley and recommended by the Office of Planning and Research, OPR, that Roger mentioned, using a research tool called CalAdapt, which was actually one of the recommendations coming out of California's first climate change assessment. So there has been some progress in terms of being able to provide information, and it allows for what are called local climate change snapshots. So across a couple different types of climate indicators, we were able to compare baseline historical data with mid-century and end-of-century predictions for those climate variables under 2 very commonly used emission scenarios, a medium emissions scenario with stabilization in mid-century, and a high emission scenario with emissions continuing unabated. These scenarios are global scenarios, so they're regardless of how successful Los Altos is or isn't with climate mitigation, greenhouse gas mitigation on the local scale. We know that climate change globally and throughout the country and California will continue, and so the need to adapt is still there, even while action is being taken on the GHG mitigation side. The relationship between emissions and temperature is the simplest to predict and the most clear. So you see average temperatures increasing several degrees by 2050 and even more by 2100. And in some ways even more worrisome, the number of days of extreme heat in Los Altos is expected to increase quite a bit. Rainfall and the relationship between climate change and precipitation is a bit less clear, or maybe I should say less linear than the relationship between emissions and temperature. It's predicted that heavy rainfall events that occur now in Los Altos once a year, or maybe less than once a year, could start occurring multiple times a year. At the same time, average precipitation isn't expected to change, meaning those times between those heavy rainfalls are going to be drier springs, summers, and falls. And I said that we use CalAdapt to get a local snapshot, which is true, but for some climate phenomena that are more complex, and particularly where Los Altos, the climate systems and physical systems that Los Altos is a part of extend beyond its boundaries. It can become meaningless just to look at how climate is changing in the Los Altos grid. So as an example of that, Los Altos is not likely to experience wildfires directly. Most cities do not. Instead, most fires occur in the wildlands urban interface. There's the Santa Clara County Fire District, which can respond. You have a system of water pressure throughout the city, pressurized for water safety. But the regional risk for wildfire is quite strong. So you may not have buildings burned, but we have to imagine that you have days or weeks where the air pollution is so bad that recess is canceled in school and all activities take place inside. And so I use that also to kind of say the ways in which climate change will bring kind of disaster level impacts and some pretty severe changes, but along the way and intermittently, it will also bring discomfort and disruption. And so climate adaptation is being able to plan for these long range and kind of catastrophic things, as well as some of these more minor and personal kind of disruptions. Thanks, Ben.
Great, thank you, Zach. And so we talked a little bit about the current state of greenhouse gas emissions and climate preparedness within the city. We also talked about the city's goals, future goals for carbon neutrality and resilience. So to help get from the current state to reach the city's goals, a series of strategies and actions were developed for the 2021 CAP. 15 strategies in total have been developed, 9 mitigation strategies, 2 adaptation strategies, and 4 cross-cutting strategies, which affect both mitigation and adaptation, which we'll talk more about in a little bit, as well as 70 actions to help accomplish the strategies. So actions are a little more at the tactical level. So we've developed 40 mitigation actions, 13 adaptation, and 17 cross-cutting actions. So how are the strategies selected and how are they developed? First, we took the existing strategies from the 2013 CAP that were still relevant. We continued them. If there were areas to expand on them and make them more aggressive, we did that. If there were kind of add-ons based on new technologies or business models, we bolstered the existing strategies with those. We also looked at the total greenhouse gas emissions reductions, which were all quantified. So obviously for an aggressive target like carbon neutrality, there's lots of greenhouse gas emissions that will need to happen within the city. So that was a primary consideration. We surveyed best and local practices to see the types of innovative things that were working locally around the Bay Area as well as globally. There was, as we mentioned, a robust stakeholder engagement process related to the CAP with a number of focus groups and surveys. So that feedback was factored in, as well as mapping to the areas of greatest need. So as we discussed, transportation and energy make up kind of the lion's share of emissions from the city. So as a result, we have proportionally more transportation and energy strategies. And then lastly, we prioritize them based on impact. And this is impact really going beyond just greenhouse gas emissions, looking at things like co-benefits. So will they help improve human health and wellness? Will they have benefits to the economy? Things like that were also factored in. And now we're going to look a little bit more closely at some of the key mitigation actions. And for this, we really did want to develop a broad-based set of actions. So even though the majority of emissions come from transportation and energy, there's many other benefits to addressing other sectors. So we wanted to make sure to factor those in. That said, we did focus pretty heavily on reducing single occupancy vehicle trips, electrifying transportation, and building decarbonization, as well as looking at municipal operations and reducing consumption and waste. Some of the key goals and targets that were developed as part of the 2021 CAP, we looked really strongly at creating a walkable and bikeable city. So making it kind of, as was discussed, I think in a comment earlier in the meeting, making it really easy and convenient, inviting and safe for folks to walk and bike through town, promoting smart growth strategies. So as was also mentioned earlier in the meeting, creating more high density areas, mixed use areas, affordable housing, reducing the urban sprawl, looking at supporting shared mobility. So making sure that, again, it's quick and easy for folks to access transit and other shared modes of transportation, accelerating electric vehicle adoption. So here the Bay Area is really a leader nationally in electric vehicle adoption. So we're looking to continue to push that curve and continue to expand EV adoption in the city. Facilitate building decarbonization. So retrofitting existing buildings to be more efficient and to switch fuels from fossil fuels to electric, and reducing consumption and waste, so continuing to increase the landfill diversion rate. And now looking a little bit more closely at some specific strategies and actions. So again, reducing single occupancy vehicle travel. So there's kind of a hierarchy when looking at decarbonizing transportation. And the first is really getting people out of their fossil fuel vehicles and promoting other means of transportation. So again, promoting a walkable and bikeable city. That involves implementing the 2021 Complete Streets Master Plan, creating pedestrian-friendly spaces and destinations throughout the city. So places that are pleasant and easy for people to congregate, and developing a parking management strategy. So reducing the need to develop new parking for new construction. Goal number 2, promoting smart growth strategies. So again, this is really promoting transit-oriented development. So mixed use developments that are really centered around their proximity to transit. Encouraging live near work incentives. So trying to make it so that folks don't have to drive for hours to reach their work. Work is closer. Supporting shared mobility. So developing a citywide electric shuttle program, as well as e-bike and e-scooter programs. And the electric shuttle program was one that really had a lot of attention and support during the stakeholder engagement process. And then working with transit providers to increase transit service within the city and improving first and last mile options. So that's really about when folks take transit, and then they're at the transit stop, making it easy and convenient for them to get from the transit stop to their destination. And then the second strategy, we recognize that some folks are still going to want or need to drive themselves in their own private vehicles. So we want to make sure that we electrify that transportation. So that's really, again, about increasing electric vehicle adoption within the city, making sure that folks are aware of and taking advantage of incentives through Silicon Valley Clean Energy, Pacific Gas and Electric incentives, as well as other local and national incentives. And then just promoting electric vehicles at the city level. So conducting things like electric vehicle fairs, doing things to really increase education and awareness and get people excited about purchasing electric vehicles. And then in parallel to that, we also want to increase the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So adding level 2 EV charging in commercial and multifamily areas. So making sure that folks that might not have the ability to add charging at their homes still have access to charging. I'm creating a network of DC fast chargers in commercial areas and main corridors. So helping to overcome some of that range anxiety that people may have when traveling through Los Altos. And then doubling the current EV charging pre-wiring requirements for upcoming REACH codes. So again, before infrastructure goes in, just making sure that it's built with those EV pre-wiring considerations. And then getting into energy strategies and actions. Similar to transportation, there's kind of a hierarchy here where the first thing that we want to do is make sure that our buildings are operating as efficiently as possible, that we're not wasting energy. So this involves residential and commercial energy audits to see where the areas of highest energy use are and where the greatest gains could be accomplished. And then again, making sure that folks are aware and taking advantage of existing programs for energy efficiency and looking at some city-led programs to facilitate that as well. Next, once buildings are kind of efficient as possible, we want to look at decarbonizing those buildings. So buildings will still use energy, but making sure that that energy is clean as possible. And this really, as we mentioned, involves eliminating or reducing the use of utility-provided methane gas. So there's a couple ways that this could be accomplished. The first is through REACH codes for buildings that haven't been built yet. The easiest and most efficient way to do this is for new buildings. And then looking at existing buildings, making sure that the city is taking advantage of programs and developing new programs to retrofit residential and commercial buildings. So this involves switching appliances that use methane gas, converting those to electric. And then goal number 3 involves disincentivizing the use of methane gas. So we use a couple different methods to kind of help change behavior. We use what we call push and pull methods. So we try and pull people towards cleaner habits by providing incentives and things like that. And then we use push methods, which make it a little more inconvenient to, to continue the old ways of doing things that might cause more pollution. And then goal number 4, this involves off-road fossil fuel use. So this is around, predominantly like fossil fuel landscaping equipment and things like that, not things that are in the home or on the roads, but off-road sources. And then the third strategy involves increasing solar energy and storage within the community. So again, making sure that folks are aware of and taking advantage of incentives for solar, increasing the solar capacity within the city, and then also looking at battery storage and pairing battery storage with solar systems, which also can help homes be more resilient. And then looking at other focus areas, as I mentioned, we really wanted to develop a broad set of strategies and actions. So we looked at reducing consumption and waste. So things like increasing the landfill diversion rate, working with Mission Trail waste systems to increase the diversion rate to 95% over time. Adopting a new ordinance to eliminate single-use plastics. And this is one that I think had a lot of support from the business community during stakeholder engagement meetings, which was really encouraging. I think the idea might have even originated within the business community. And we know, we know the negative effects of plastics. And so we want to make sure to reduce single-use plastics as much as possible. And then reduce waste from construction and building materials. So this involves switching from demolition to deconstruction of new buildings, so that waste could be reduced that way. Goal number 2, conserving water. So really making sure that we're promoting water efficient buildings and landscapes. And then goal number 3 is promote a circular economy. So this is really around education and awareness for citizens, promoting sustainable food choices, awareness of the benefits of plant-based diets, and then increasing the knowledge of responsible goods and service consumption. So really educating residents about switching away from the make, use, dispose of model, and really switching to a model where the end of life is taken into account in the design and manufacture of different products. And then next, we also looked at municipal operations. So we looked at increasing building efficiency within municipal buildings. So this involves conducting comprehensive energy audits for city buildings and performing upgrades based on the results of those audits. We also looked at developing solar and storage at new facilities and existing facilities. So making sure that any new city buildings are built to net zero standards, and exploring microgrids on existing facilities. And then the third strategy was decarbonizing the municipal fleet. So developing a phase out program so that as the city replaces its fleet vehicles, those vehicles are replaced with electric alternatives. And then getting into a little bit of the cross-cutting actions. As we mentioned, these affect both greenhouse gas emissions and help make the city more resilient. Done correctly, these could work together. So a good example is increasing the urban tree canopy can provide relief on high heat days, and it also reduces the need for AC use in buildings. Done incorrectly, these can work against each other if they're not kind of implemented thoughtfully. So an example is a microgrid can have benefits in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and increasing resiliency if the microgrid is using renewable energy. But if the microgrid is using diesel fuel, then that's working against the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So that's just an example of how those could work against or for each other. And then getting into some of the specific cross-cutting actions, key strategies and actions, we really looked at developing nature-based solutions, so expanding green infrastructure to improve water resilience. This involves updating the building code to incentivize rainwater harvesting and gray water recycling, as well as we kind of touched on before, creating water efficient buildings and landscapes. And then we also looked at carbon sequestration opportunities and opportunities to expand natural environments. So this is really around increasing the urban tree canopy, developing urban forests, as well as expanding parks and natural wooded spaces. And then the second strategy is understanding and reducing risks within the city. So reducing flood risk, conducting updated flood risk study, an updated flood risk study with capital and policy recommendations, implementing comprehensive riparian ecosystem restoration plan and floodplain management policies, and reducing heat risk, which involves identifying and mapping areas of urban heat island and enacting reflectivity and green standards for asphalt and ground level surfaces and roofs. And next, think, yes, we'll look at adaptation strategies, and I'll go ahead and hand back to Zach to go through some of the adaptation strategies.
Thanks, Ben. There are just a couple that aren't also mitigation strategies, so I'll go through those pretty quickly, so we have some time for discussion. Next, please. So the first strategy really centers around integrating adaptation planning into emergency preparedness and response. Ben had earlier, and we have in the plan to integrate mitigation and adaptation into municipal operations and kind of standard functions and updates that government has. Emergency preparedness and response is an important city function, and folks in emergency management from police were included in the plan, and it's really important that they begin to think about these new types of climate hazards that the city is facing as part of their purview. Particularly extreme heat is a type of climate hazard that is really novel to Los Altos, but is expected to become a lot more common. So developing a citywide heat management plan is an important first step. We also heard that there was a day labor, outdoor worker workforce in Los Altos, and that we needed temperature and heat safety protocols to protect them. Similarly, that we need to think about adjusting what outdoor public life looks like. And so changing park and public facility hours during heat waves, and expanding public drinking fountains and refillable water stations. And as I mentioned earlier, Los Altos may not be at direct risk from wildfires destroying buildings, but air pollution from wildfires is very likely to increase. So thinking about how that is managed at an individual level, at a building level, is really important. And then the second strategy is focused on educating and protecting residents more generally. Part of that is establishing resilience hubs. This is a best practice, certainly in California and other places. And these are centers that can function in the event of power failures, in the event of floods, extreme heat, to keep people safe. And so part of the piece of protecting residents is also understanding who the vulnerable communities are who are in Los Altos, where they're located, and making sure that the existing facilities that serve those populations are aware of climate risks and can be supported and upgraded for those populations in the future, and at the same time establishing these new resilience hubs. And then finally, improving climate literacy and risk understanding is something that is necessary as the risks of climate change continue to evolve, and as we get more information. So one of the pieces of that was seeing how the existing requirement for flood hazard risk disclosure in property sales and during the real estate process could be strengthened. Thanks, man.
Thanks again, Zach. So what are some of the projected outcomes of these strategies and actions? there are several that we've identified. The first, of course, is greenhouse gas reductions. There's also energy savings and associated cost savings for community members that come with that. Reducing vehicle miles traveled, and then minimizing exposure to climate risks and preparing for the unavoidable effects of climate change. And then again, as we mentioned, just a healthier population. So people being more active, having more active and healthy lifestyles, being outside more. We also predict benefits to the economy. So really kind of solidifying Los Altos as a destination where folks will want to come. They'll want to take transit or park their electric vehicle and spend the day. And there's lots of really pleasant outdoor spaces for them to visit, and then they could stay and visit their favorite restaurant at the end of the day. And then lastly, helping to create an equitable society. So as Zach mentioned, there are vulnerable populations within the city, including seniors and day workers, that might have certain limitations. So we want to make sure that we're addressing that. And then lastly, just the general impacts, acknowledging that the impacts of climate change tend to fall generally on less affluent societies. So making sure that, as a community, we're all doing our part to reduce our impacts. And then in terms of next steps, we're planning a target date of a draft cap for public review by the end of the month or towards the end of the month. We're targeting November 1st through November 12th for Environmental Commission review and comment. And then we're targeting November 11th to integrate all that comment and have a draft for City Council review. And then we've targeted November 20th through December 7th, rather, for Council review. And we've targeted December 14th for Council adoption of the cap. And I think with that, we could take any questions.
Okay, well, there's a lot there, so I'm sure that there will be questions. I first want, and thank you so much for all your work and for that thorough presentation. I just wanted to clarify based on a comment earlier, when VMT is, when vehicle miles traveled are calculated, that includes, there's a methodology for including travel through the city, right? It's not just, so that includes perhaps workers that are going to and from their jobs that travel through the city, is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. And the tool that we used to calculate vehicle miles traveled was the Metropolitan Transportation Commission vehicle miles traveled portal, which, yeah, it does take that into account.
Great, thank you. I have some more questions or feedback, but I wanted to first open up to other commissioners for any questions. And I can't see everybody. Mika, if you could, or whoever's sharing screen, if you could stop sharing, that would be great. Thank you. So if there are any commissioner questions or feedback, I mean, most of you are on the subcommittees. We've already had a chance to see this, to look at this. So I will go ahead and jump in. So when the final report is done, is there going to be, we want to think about all the actions and the strategies. There's going to be a lot, right? And is there going to be some way that it's there's an implementation schedule or prioritized actions? And specifically thinking about, we achieved our previous target in large part, as you said, because we joined SVCE. And so are there some of those, big, impact actions that we can prioritize and in the plan?
Yeah, good question. So there is an implementation timeline. Every action will be designated as either short, medium, and long term. So there will be kind of a schedule that the city can follow. So, not everything will be expected to happen right at once. And then, I'm sorry, the other part of your question was?
Well, I guess also identifying some actions that will have really big impact, right, that we can do, fairly quickly. Because some of these things, changing a building code takes a long time to have, when you're talking about buildings that only get rebuilt once every 50 or 100 years.
Right. Yes, there are some, and we tried, like I mentioned, to develop kind of a broad-based set of strategies so that there's not, so that the emissions reductions are kind of spread out a little bit, but definitely implementing the Complete Streets Master Plan. We're projecting some fairly substantial emissions reductions from that. And then also the building decarbonization efforts will have a pretty large impact, I think. So retrofitting, appliances and, methane gas appliances in existing buildings with electric alternatives will also have a large impact.
There commissioner questions or feedback? So overall, I mean, just for the subcommittee, I'm happy to see. I feel like you upped the game on the vision a bit, which I was happy to see, and it seems very comprehensive. My hope is that there will be. This isn't, obviously this needs to be a living document. And so because of the complexity of it, I worry a little bit about it, being not a user friendly. I mean, this is something we really need to implement and it needs to be more of a guidebook as opposed to a report that, will be too complex for us to take action on. So that's my hope, is that it's really actionable.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a lot. We included quite a bit, and that's really based on kind of the guidance that we got from the subcommittee and from the community as a whole. In terms of implementation, I think I think the timeline will help. Again, just seeing kind of what has to be accomplished when. We're also planning on developing some cost estimates. So just kind of getting a ballpark sense of how much will all this cost, and then pairing each action to funding resources. So, how much will it cost, and then where can the city find funding? Kind of related to some of the, the previous presentation we saw. So we think that those steps like that will help make this a very actionable plan that the city will be able to implement.
There are no other comments or questions from the commission. I will go ahead and open it up to the public. So it looks like we have Mr. Hedden wanting to speak, and I think that's all I see right now. So Gary, go ahead.
Thank you, Laura. Chair Texler, honored commissioners. I'm Gary Hedden, resident of Los Altos. I'm also on the board with Greentown Los Altos, but basically I'm speaking for myself tonight. I was on the Environmental Commission when the 2013 Climate Action Plan was prepared. Much has happened in the past 8 years, but the situation now is even more urgent. A lot of people, myself included, feel that we must bend the curve on GHG emissions in the next 10 years and that we must do more. In Los Altos, we are intellectually and financially capable of doing more. We get it. We understand the risk and we can afford to do more. We can be among the leaders showing what is possible. I like the goals in your plan, but I was hoping for more than a reading of the slides. Ben, you did a nice job, but I need to see the details. How much will each action cost? And how much will each contribute to greenhouse gas reductions? That would make this presentation more believable. SMART goals have a timeline and measurable metrics. We need to see that. I question some of the language. Some of it is too soft. Words like support, encourage, and consider are weak. Please replace them with strong words like require and implement. Make the goals clear. The goal for energy efficiency retrofits is clear. 440 units per year. The others are not clear. By 2035 is a weak goal. Many goals such as increased fuel switching, increased battery storage, increased landfill diversion rates are weak. They need a timeline and an amount. Some of the actions I even question. Rainwater harvesting does not make sense in Los Altos because we do not get summer rain, unless you're expecting some dramatic changes. Expanding our parks and woodland spaces does not make very much sense because we are a built-out community. We don't need a heat mapping study because we know the major source of urban heat. It's asphalt roads and parking lots and dark rooftops. Sorry. I would also like to see a graph showing our progress to 2035. It will give us target points along the way, and we must do regular evaluations to show how we are meeting these target points. Thank you for your hard work, and I look forward to the final report.
Thank you, Gary. And I wanted to, so generally this isn't, we get comments from the public and it's not a discussion back and forth, but I do believe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Ben, that, this is not the final product, and that the final product will have some of the specificity that I think Mr. Hedden was talking about in terms of specific measurable goals, timeline. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is. And Gary, thanks for your comment. Yeah, a lot of those details are forthcoming, and we're developing those right now. So a lot of, those details will be in the final plan. And then I also wanted to just mention that in terms of the language and how kind of, soft or binding that language would be, this was kind of a delicate process where we worked with, the community stakeholders and the city stakeholders. So we tried to kind of strike a balance between kind of requiring things to be actionable and at the same time providing some leeway in other areas that, that we felt that leeway was needed. And so that's, that was the intent of the language. I think that said, some of that is still, that's the purpose of some of these meetings, I think, is to kind of finalize that language.
We have two more public speakers. Mr. Riffle, would you have comments?
Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing the public to listen in on this. And I'm really impressed by the presentation from the consultants. So again, I'm Kurt Riffle, and I happen to be a director on the board of the Mid-Peninsula Open Space District for representing Los Altos and Mountain View. And so my comments this evening are actually my personal views as a citizens of Los Altos, and not represent anything that the district would be doing or saying. I've had the opportunity to review and provide inputs to the Climate Action Plan. And again, I applaud the openness and the transparency of it. And what I really like about it is that it, we hear so much about the dire situation with climate change every day. This gives, I think, the citizens an opportunity to say, this is what we're doing about it, and this is what we can actually get engaged with. So I really like that. while I think it is clear, I think it's actionable, I think it's measurable, I have to admit, I really appreciate and agree with Gary's comments. I really think that we can do more. So for example, the 15-year plan, that almost seems like that's not fast enough. The other thing that I was wondering about is what about the public education and engagement for this? We heard a lot about the plan, but I think just as important is how is this going to be communicated to the citizens of Los Altos? Because I think we're going to be really excited to get behind this and support it. The other thing is I'm wondering about how can we leverage the work of other cities and other agencies. It almost seems very siloed to Los Altos, and I get it that it's a Los Altos Climate Action Plan, but gosh, so much good work is being done in Mountain View and Palo Alto. I almost wonder is there a way that we should be thinking about how do we cooperate with them and to kind of share successes. And my final comment is that I'm really happy to see 2 of our 5 council members are attending tonight's presentation. So that makes me optimistic that we're going to see some action from our city council on adopting this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have one more hand up. Kabir Butch. I'm sorry if I got your name totally wrong.
No, that's it. So I wanted to ask about the monitoring and reporting of the CAP once it's implemented. I feel that the CAP from 2013, despite promising annual reporting and quantifiable progress updates, kind of failed to do so. So with that in mind, are there any changes to the way that the CAAP will be monitoring itself in order to make sure it's more successful?
Yeah, I could answer that question, and thank you for that question. For this Climate Action Plan update, we utilized the ClearPath software platform, which is developed by ICLEI, which with folks who are familiar with ICLEI, they work internationally with cities on climate action planning. So there's actually functionality within the ClearPath platform for yearly monitoring and reporting. So I think that'll be a very kind of efficient way for the city to conduct greenhouse gas updates and put together reports to communicate those results out to the city. So that's one change that I think that'll make that just easier for the city to facilitate.
Thank you. Let's see, do we have any other public comments? So we have our Councilmember Meadows with her hand up.
Yep. Good evening. Thanks for the presentation. Clearly a lot of work has gone on. And thanks for the public comments. I particularly want to second Mr. Hedden's observations and say that I agree with some of them. I want to point out a couple things that I think will help as you work on the next draft and think about presenting to council. And that is that the slides really could have used more graphical representations of the information you were showing. I'm actually consider myself a data person. I've worked with data during most of my career and found it very hard to picture what you were trying to say. So I would really get away from all the words, let the pictures do some of the talking when appropriate, or use a combination thereof. It would be helpful when you're presenting to the city as a whole, I think. What I missed, and I think you said you were going to do, but I didn't see, and my apologies if I just didn't follow it, was, there's a lot of strategies and actions and things. I did not see a prioritization or a bang for the buck assigned to each one. So I know that they can't all be equal priority. And so we need to have sort of an impact score for each of those. I think it's also going to be a consideration for council to consider the amount of resources needed to achieve something. And so, for example, if something's high impact and low resource, well, we're going to do as many of those as we can. But if you've got high resource and low impact, forget about it. So We really need some way to sort out all this information to help us understand where we are currently resourced, what we might need to do, and what is most impactful. Because without that, I think it's going to be very hard to get council to understand what they're looking at. So one other thing I reacted to, and this is just personally, I heard a couple times that Los Altos will not be directly affected by the wildfires. I think that's a rather potentially overly optimistic statement. I have been in neighborhoods of Los Altos that are potentially very prone to wildfire. So I would really alter that message. I think in California, we're all more prone to wildfire than we expect. So I think that's a really dangerous message to have our community feel that we're only going to be affected by the air pollution, because I don't think that's accurate. And so I just wanted to give you that feedback, because I think the next draft would benefit sort of with an eye to those perceptions of those questions that other council members may also have. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Bettis. Yes, I think that's helpful feedback going forward and for presentation to council. And I will just also say, you know, particularly with, you know, other commissions that are involved in this work. So, you know, Complete Streets and Parks, I would assume that at some point they have, I know that they were involved as stakeholders, but also will get presentation on some of this work as well, just so they understand that, you know, we're all working together on the same goal. All right, any other? Thank you all again. It's great to see this finally happening for those of us who've been on the commission for years and wanting to see this update. It's really great to see it happening now. So thank you all.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thanks for all the great feedback from everyone.
And we will see you next time. Okay. Good night.
Good night.
All right. So now we have the rest of our work plan, although this is obviously the major part of what we're doing these days. Amico, I know that there were a few attachments to the work plan on some upcoming workshops and for commissioners to know if you want. I don't know if you wanted to say a few words about that.
Sure, you can do that. So the first one was for October 19th, and that is the implicit bias session. That's from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And I did send out information on that. I believe the link has not been set up by the city clerk yet. And so I know one was just sent. Let me just check really quick here. I think that was for the second one. Yeah, that was the annual. Okay, so the next one. So for that one, we will send out the link. It may come directly from the city clerk's office, but if not, and they send it to us, then I will forward that over. Or I think maybe it was in an attachment, so I will look into that. And then the second one is the October 22nd. That's the Commissioner Annual Training. And that'll take place from 3:30 to 5 o'clock p.m. And so that is going to be virtual. And they did send out the link to that. And so that was sent by Angel. And so if you didn't receive that, let me know and I will forward his email on, but you should have all received the link for that. And then also you will receive the Commissioner Handbook and the council norms. So these just came out today. And so those will all be forwarded to you actually probably tonight after this meeting. And so if you have any questions about that, please send them my way, and I can send those over to the city clerk if there's any questions about that. I think those were the only 3 that were in there.
Yeah, so I'll just call out there were 2 attachments, the Bayren workshop. It's a webinar on home energy improvements, and this is until November 18th, so we got quite a while. But and then also Cal Water rebate. These are just notification and rebate programs, but those are both attached to the work plan if you want to check those out.
Oh yeah, I might have gone a step ahead. I'm sorry.
That's all right, no worries. Do we have any other work plan items that need quick updates, or?
I don't think so. And the reason why the Cal Water one was in there, and I think I had that there last time, was because they just relaunched those 2 programs. Great programs if you're looking to switch a portion or your lawn to more drought tolerant landscaping.
And I will just quickly note that AB 1346, the lawn, I always get this, the phasing out of basically gas-powered lawn equipment has been passed. So that is great news. Okay, so.
I believe it was also signed by the governor.
Right. It's implemented, I should have said, not just passed, but it will be implemented. It's on its way. Okay. So no other work plan items, and I think, Amiko, that you just did your staff update, correct?
Yes, I did.
Great. And then for commissioner report and comments, I just wanted to let everybody know, I think it was last meeting that we had a little discussion about this meeting. We may be back in person, obviously. That didn't happen, the order got extended, but I believe that the council has on the agenda for tomorrow to talk about returning in person for a council and commission. So, you know, it's an opportunity if you have questions or concerns to make a public comment there at tomorrow night's council meeting. So once they decide that that the council and commissions are going back, then we will be back in person. So if you have any things that want to be considered as they discuss that.
We can't hear you, Laura. All of a sudden. I mean, we heard you, but then now we don't hear you.
Hello?
Oh, we can hear you.
You can hear me now. Okay, that was weird. Okay, I was just asking if there are any other commissioner reports, comments. No? Okay, and all right, great. So future agenda items, as if we don't.
I think we have to do the reports from, let's see, September 14th, September 21st council meeting.
Yes.
So I know that Commissioner Humayun doesn't have any audio, so she won't be able to speak on the September 14th, but she says she can give the report.
And then were you at the other one?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Oh, I think it was Bruno at the September.
Yeah, I was at the 21st meeting, but there was nothing really substantial for us at that meeting.
Well, with that, if there's anything else, I think we can adjourn for tonight. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay.